They called it freedom, but to Isaiah Carter, freedom felt like sweat rolling down your back while your knees dug in the dry, cracked dirt. It sounded like a cotton sack dragging behind you, heavy with another man's future, and it smelled like blood that wouldn't wash out the shirt your daddy wore every damn day of his life. This is Mark Joie, and you're listening to Injustice Browin. If you feel this story deep in your bones, if it echoes something you've lived, something you've seen, make sure to subscribe. Drop your thoughts in the comments. We read every word, because these stories, they're not just stories. They're pieces of us. Isaiah was born in the Mississippi Delta in 1939. By 10 years old, he already knew how to sort good cotton from spoiled, how to pick fast enough to keep the overseer's voice from rising, and how to hide pain without moving your face. His hands were always cut, his back always sore. But what hurt most was watching his father come home every night just smaller, not in body, but in spirit, like something in him was being scraped out, piece by piece, by a world that smiled at your suffering if you were black and poor. His daddy, James Carter, had once worn a uniform, fought in France during the war, came back thinking things might be different. But Mississippi didn't change. It just got quieter about the hate, more polite in its cruelty. They called it separate but equal, but there wasn't a single damn thing equal about it. Not the schools, not the land, not the way a white man could spit on you in front of your child and walk away without a single flicker of consequence. The Carters lived in a one-room shack on land they didn't own, picking cotton for a man who didn't even know their names. Every season, the debt ledger said they owed more than they earned. Every season, they started over broke, trapped, sharecropping, they called it. But Isaiah knew it by its real name, legal slavery. Sometimes at night, when the wind pushed through the broken window panes just right, you could swear the floorboards whispered things, old things, things about blood and whips and chains. Isaiah would lay still on the thin mattress, beside his sisters, eyes wide open, listening, and he'd wonder how many bones were buried beneath that field he worked all day. Isaiah's mother, Ruth, was a soft voice in a hard world. She sang while cooking hymns, mostly not because she believed things would get better, but because singing was cheaper than crying, and because in that place, the moment your hope died, everything else followed. Every Sunday, they walked 6 miles to a wooden church that leaned like it was tired to. No piano, just voices. They'd sing until the rafters shook. Then the preacher would talk about justice and heaven, and about how God saw everything, even what white folks thought they got away with. Isaiah always watched his father during those sermons, watched how he clenched his jaw and looked out the window, like he was trying to remember something better than this. One day, Isaiah asked him why he never looked the preacher in the eye. James just said, "Ain't no heaven in Mississippi, boy." And that was that. The older Isaiah got, the more he saw how carefully his family moved through the world. Eyes down, hats off around white folks, always smiling, always saying yes, sir. Not because they respected the man, but because not saying it might get you killed. There was a boy once, Ezekiel, about 16, said something slick to a store clerk. He was found in the river 3 days later. Isaiah never forgot the way his mama screamed when they pulled the body out. That sound, it didn't fade. It sank into your bones. By 14, Isaiah had seen more grief than most men did in a lifetime, but he also saw something else. In the way his mother prayed, in the way his father stood back up every day, even when he looked like he might not, in the way the people around him didn't quit, even when everything in the world told them they should. There was a strength to that, a quiet kind of power. It didn't roar, it didn't shine, but it lasted still. Isaiah knew one thing for sure. If he stayed, he'd die like the others, bent over, worked dry, forgotten by a country that only called on black men when it needed war, music, or labor, never when it needed truth. And so, one night, with nothing but a folded bus ticket to cold biscuits and the address of a cousin up north scribbled on paper, Isaiah walked away from the Delta. He didn't look back, not because he didn't care, but because he was scared if he did, the dirt might not let go. He left behind a family that prayed for him, a mother who cried into her apron, a father who didn't say goodbye, just handed him a pocket knife and walked back into the field like always. Isaiah didn't know where that bus was taking him, only that it had to be somewhere better, somewhere where the ghosts couldn't follow, somewhere he could finally breathe. But the thing about pain, it travels light. and it never misses a ride. The North had a different kind of bite. It didn't wear robes or burn crosses, but it froze your hands just the same. The bus dropped Isaiah off in Chicago in the fall of 1956. The air smelled like smoke and steel and people who didn't look you in the eye unless they needed something. He stepped off the Greyhound wearing his only jacket, 2 sizes too big, and the worn shoes his mama polished the night before he left. They had holes in the soles before Christmas. The city moved fast, too fast for a country boy with calloused hands and soft words. But Isaiah kept walking, kept breathing. He found his cousin, Tyrone, living in a tenement off 47th and Indiana, cramped with 6 other men who all worked too many hours and spoke a few words. Rent was steep, so was the silence, but nobody asked where you came from or why your hands shook when a siren passed. That was enough for Isaiah for a while. He found work at a steel mill, sweeping the floors where white men spat and dropped things for him to pick up. He made less than them, got shouted at more, but it was money, and at 17, money meant power, or at least the illusion of it. The North didn't spit in your face, it just erased you slowly. People looked past you like you were part of the brick. The city didn't care what war your daddy fought or how much cotton you picked. If you were black, you got the bottom rung, always. Housing, jobs, schools. Different zip code, same chains, just shinnier. Still, something in Isaiah wouldn't stay quiet. Maybe it was what he saw on the factory floor, how the black workers always got the rusted gloves and the broken lockers. Maybe it was the way Tyrone came home limping one night and said nothing, but left blood in the sink. Maybe it was church on Sundays, where the preacher in Bronzeville sounded like thunder when he talked about rising up. Whatever it was, it lit something in Isaiah, and once it lit, it didn't dim. He started asking questions. Why did the black section always get last pick on safety gear? Why were they laid off first, rehired last? Why did white men with less experience make double his pay? At first, it was quiet questions, whispered in the break room. Then it became louder. He stood up during meetings, asked out loud. They called him boy the first time, laughed. Then the laughter stopped, and the stares got longer, colder. Isaiah didn't care. He spoke anyway, not to fight, just to name the truth. At work, at church, on corners with men who'd stopped dreaming and women who scrubbed floors so their kids didn't have to. He organized a petition once, just signatures, asking for better gloves and cleaner water fountains. Simple stuff. The next week, he was put on night shift alone, a warning that didn't stop him either, but it did shift something in how people looked at him, how they stood a little further away, how Tyrone told him, "You need to chill, cousin. This ain't the South, but it ain't freedom either." Isaiah just smiled, tired. Then what is it? Tyrone didn't answer, just went back to cleaning his boots. Quiet like always. The North wasn't burning crosses, but it had its own fire. Quieter, slicker. It didn't kill you in the open. It buried you in work, in silence, in fear. But Isaiah had already crawled out of the dirt once. He wasn't going back under for anyone. The fire inside him kept burning, kept growing. And in the stillness of his tiny rented room, late at night, he started to write, not just letters home, but words that felt bigger than him, about dignity, about shame, about the right to be seen. He kept those pages folded under his mattress, like secrets, like a map he hadn't finished drawing, but someone was watching. Someone didn't like the way Isaiah's words moved people, and in Chicago, in 1963, being allowed in the wrong room could still get you silenced. It was January 1963, cold enough to crack your skin if you stayed outside too long, the kind of night where breath turned solid and the streets emptied out early. But Isaiah didn't come home. Tyrone waited, pacing that one-bedroom apartment like a man tracking ghosts. Midnight came, then 2, then dawn. No Isaiah, no call, no nothing. They found him near a fence off Houston, his coat torn, his teeth shattered, face so swollen, Tyrone had to look twice just to recognize him. His boots were gone, wallet too. The cops said it was a robbery, just another black man in the wrong place at the wrong time. But everybody knew Isaiah wasn't out looking for trouble. Trouble came looking for him. He'd been calling out names, at the mill, in meetings, on union flyers passed hand to hand like contraband, white foremen skimming off wages, managers forcing black workers onto the most dangerous shifts, then losing the injury reports. Isaiah wrote it all down, spoke it into rooms that weren't used to black men raising their voice, and for that, Somi and Ed decided he needed to shut up. They didn't kill him, but they came close. His jaw was broken into places, ribs cracked, one eye bloodied shut. The hospital stitched him together without much care, like a patch job on a man they'd already written off. When he woke up, he couldn't talk. For weeks, just silence. No sermons, no protest speeches, not even a whisper. Just that quiet, pulsing pain in his face every time he tried to say his own name. They thought they'd taken something from him, thought they'd broken the weapon he used most, his voice. But Isaiah didn't stop. He just changed his strategy. When his mouth couldn't move, his hands picked up the pen, and that pen cut just as deep from that hospital bed. He wrote through the pain, through the meds, through the shaking in his fingers. He wrote letters to papers that never printed his name, letters to local organizers, letters to himself. Every injustice he had ever seen, every man buried under silence, he poured onto the page like it was holy. The fire was still burning, just different now, quieter, but hotter. And when he finally healed enough to walk again, he didn't go back to the mill. He went back to church, sat in the back row, listened, watched. When the preacher asked if he wanted to speak, Isaiah shook his head once, slow. He couldn't say it, but the answer was no. He'd learned what it cost to raise your voice in a world built to mute you. But he also learned how power lives in the quiet, in what you write, in what you pass down, in what survives even after they try to bury you. Tyrone never asked who did it. He already knew. Everybody in the neighborhood did. The white cop who patrolled their block a little too often. The supervisor at the mill who smiled too wide when Isaiah got transferred to the night shift. The man who warned him to mind his lane 2 days before it happened. But nobody said anything, because silence was survival. Isaiah knew that now. So he kept his head down, wore a scarf to cover the scars, never raised his voice above a murmur. Again, but he never stopped fighting. He just moved to the shadows, the basements, the back rooms. He became the man you came to when you needed help writing a letter to the housing board, when your boy got beat by police and no one believed you, when you were scared but ready. Isaiah would listen, then write your truth like it was his own. He never looked for recognition, never asked for thanks. But behind every flyer, every speech, every rally that started to rise in Southside Chicago, Isaiah's words were there, even broken. He was dangerous, because you can take a man's voice, but if you leave him his fire, he will still speak. And now Isaiah understood something the men who beat him never would. You don't have to shout to be heard. You just have to survive long enough to keep telling the truth. Isaiah never spoke the same way again. His voice stayed low, gravel thick, wrapped in the scars of what they tried to silence. But his words, they grew louder, sharper, more deliberate. He filled notebook after notebook, black and white journals stacked under his bed, in the closet, under the sink. Some written in neat block letters, others frantic, smudged with sweat, with blood. Every page a memory, a protest, a lesson. He wrote down the names they forgot, the truths they twisted, the pain no one else wanted to say out loud. He wrote because paper couldn't flinch, and because if the world ever wanted to erase him again, he'd make damn sure they'd have to burn 100 books just to try. When Malik was born, something changed in Isaiah. He wasn't trying to tear down the system anymore, not like before. He was trying to build something that might outlive it. He moved slower by then, lived on cold mornings, spoke even less. But every evening, after dinner, when the dishes were done and the house went quiet, Isaiah would sit in his old chair by the window, open one of those journals, and start reading. Not like a bedtime story, not soft, not polished. He read the truth. Stories about his father James Carter, who picked cotton with war medals in his sock drawer. Stories about Miss Thelma, who ran a literacy group in secret, passing books like they were gold. Stories about brothers who vanished, mothers who screamed at God, and the power of knowing who you are in a world that tells you to forget. Malik was just a boy, maybe 8 or 9 the first time he heard the word lynching, heard it in his grandfather's raspy voice, shaking just a little as he told him about Ezekiel, the boy who mouthed off and didn't come back. Malik didn't sleep that night, but the next evening, he came back to that chair, sat down, said, "Keep going," pop, and Isaiah did, night after night, year after year. He'd read from those journals like they were scripture. He told Malik about Ida B. Wells before that school down the block ever said a word about her. He told him about Fred Hampton, about Fannie Lou Hamer, about names that didn't get holidays or postage stamps but deserved them more than most. He taught Malik how to read between the lines, how to ask better questions, how to tell when someone was trying to sell you a lie dressed as history, and most of all, he taught him that silence wasn't the absence of voice. It was the weight of everything waiting to be said. Malik carried those words like armor. He started correcting teachers in class, started challenging the whitewashed versions of history they handed out in glossy textbooks, not to be difficult, but because truth mattered more than comfort, and because Isaiah had taught him that nobody would hand it to him. He had to go get it. By the time Malik was 16, he could quote Baldwin, recite Langston Hughes from memory, and explain redlining better than most grown men. He knew what had been done to his people, but more than that, he knew what they survived, what they built, what they dreamed, and that knowing made him dangerous in all the right ways. Isaiah never asked Malik to fight his battles. He just showed him the battlefield and handed him the pen. One night, Malik asked him why he kept all those journals. Isaiah looked at him for a long time, eyes heavy but clear. Because they stole my voice, he said, quiet but sharp, and I wasn't about to let him steal the truth too. Malik nodded, didn't say a word, just reached for a blank notebook and started writing. Malik Carter walks into the courtroom like he belongs there. Not because they treat him like he does, not because the bailiff says his name right or the judge looks up when he speaks, but because Isaiah taught him that the ground beneath his feet, no matter how cold, how stolen, how rigged, was still his to stand on. He's a civil rights attorney now, one of the best in the city, and he never forgets where that fire started. Every case he takes feels personal, because it is. Young black men cuffed before they can speak. Kids tried as adults for mistakes white boys call mischief. Mothers breaking down in front of a courtroom that's already made up its mind. Malik doesn't see strangers. He sees echoes. He sees Ezekiel. He sees his grandfather, broken by a fence on Halsted. He sees all the names Isaiah wrote in those notebooks, the ones no one else remembers. So he fights, with words sharpened by truth, with facts they wish weren't real, with that calm tone that makes people nervous because it means he knows exactly what he's doing. They call him aggressive. They say he lacks professionalism, but what they really mean is he doesn't know his place. Except he does, right here, in this courtroom, defending the kind of boys they love to lock up and forget. He doesn't win every time, but when he does, it's not just a verdict, it's a resurrection. After every trial, when the courtroom clears and the dust settles, Malik reaches into his coat pocket and pulls out a small, worn notebook, edges frayed, pages loose, the last journal Isaiah ever wrote before he died. No title, just that shaky handwriting on the first page. For Malik, keep walking. Malik doesn't read it for inspiration. He reads it for grounding, for the reminder that he's not doing anything new, just continuing something sacred. Sometimes, late at night, he'll sit in his office long after the lights have gone off and flip through those pages. Isaiah's voice is still there, clear, steady, raw. He once wrote, "They buried us in silence, so we planted ourselves in memory." Malik carries that line like a prayer. He's not flashy, doesn't chase the cameras, doesn't care if they remember his name, but every now and then, he'll get a letter from a kid he defended 3 years ago, from a mother who says her son's still home because of him, from a stranger who heard him speak once and decided to apply to law school. And when that happens, Malik just smiles, quiet like his grandfather used to. He doesn't need applause. He's got the fire, and it burns steady. The system still stinks, still hides behind laws it never meant for people like him. Judges still smirk, prosecutors still twist. But Malik stands tall anyway, because he knows the truth and he knows that truth don't rot, even when buried deep. In every courtroom, Isaiah's with him, in the way he stands, in the way he looks a man in the eye and says, "No, sir, that ain't the whole story." Isaiah may have lost his voice, but Malik found it, and now he uses it for both of them. The cemetery sits just off the road, tucked behind a rusted gate and a row of crooked pine trees. It's quiet here, the kind of quiet that wraps around your bones and makes you speak softer. Even when no one else is listening, Malik stands in front of the headstone with both hands in his coat pockets. Wind tugs at his collar. He doesn't flinch. He's been meaning to come here for a while now, but life's been loud, busy, hard. Now he's here. And he's not in a rush. The stone is simple, no gold letters, no long inscriptions. Just the name Isaiah J. Carter and the dates that bookend a life full of fire. Malik clears his throat, but not to speak loud. 1-1 yesterday, he says, almost like a secret. Judge tried to push it through quick, but I had him cornered. Whole damn courtroom got real quiet when I laid out the numbers. He smiles a little. I wish you'd seen it, Pop. You would have been proud. There's a long pause. Malik's eyes drift to the ground. The wind slows. I'm sorry it took me so long to get here. He says, been carrying a lot. Too much, maybe, but I'm okay now. I got through it. He kneels down, slowly, pulls something from his coat, a pen, old, black, smooth from time and thumbprints. The one Isaiah handed him the day he gave him that final journal. Malik lays it down gently on the stone. Doesn't say anything right away. Then, barely a whisper, thank you for surviving long enough to raise me. His voice cracks a little. I finally feel free, he says. Not all the way, but more than you ever got, and that matters. He closes his eyes, and for a moment, it's like he can feel Isaiah beside him again. That quiet presence, that weight without words, not watching, just with him. Later that night, Malik tucks his daughter in. She's 8, sharp-eyed, always asking questions. She rolls onto her side, blanket up to her chin. Daddy, she says. Yeah, baby. Who's the man in the picture on your desk? The one with the scarf? Malik leans back in the doorway, and something in his chest softens. That's your great-grandfather, he says. Isaiah, was he nice? Malik smiles. He was strong, the kind of strong that don't make noise. She nods, thoughtful. Will you tell me about him? He steps into the room, sits beside her. Yeah, he says, I will. And just like that, the cycle begins again. But this time, it's different. This time, it's not survival. It's tradition. On their terms. This time, the stories won't be erased. This time, the fire doesn't burn the house down. It lights the way forward. Blood in the roots, light in the fruit, and the voice of a man who once had his jaw broken still speaking, still teaching through every word his grandson now passes on.